Welcome to Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
In today's episode, alignment. Can a DM change a character's alignment, or should they? Welcome to Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
Today's episode, we're talking about alignment. Can a DM change a character's alignment?
Or should a DM change a character's alignment?
That's a great question. I'm Delaney.
And I'm Tom.
I've been DMing since 1979.
Well, I've only been DMing since never, because I've never DM'd. So,
But he's been playing since
yeah.
2006.
So what brought this up, this concept about that we were talking about alignment?
Yeah, so I was browsing through my Android phone today, looking at the Google News, and I saw this article from CBR.com, which got it from Reddit, which posed the question of, can or should a DM change a character's alignment or a player's alignment?
Well, in the article, did they give you any kind of hypothetical situations where you might have to do something like that? Where the DM might have to change a character's alignment?
The only real one they gave was if somebody was lawful good alignment and going around murdering everybody.
Well, to me, first of all, you're not playing your alignment correctly, which means you're not playing your character correctly, which is like one of the first deadly sins of role-playing, okay? You're a good paladin, yet you, murder people. That's not a good paladin, so you can't play that character.
Right.
Okay, so there's an issue.
Right. And, alignment is this kind of, there's a line.
Yeah.
And crossing that line, if you're a lawful good player or a lawful good character, and you're going off on a killing spree or a robbing spree, that is not good. Now, in the days of first edition, we used to joke that we as the United States would see ourselves as a lawful good country, and Russia would see themselves as a lawful good country. But we would see them as chaotic evil, and they would see us as chaotic evil. So you kind of have this line of what is good and what is evil. Well, based upon what the rules dictate a lawful good, you're not going to go around killing people just haphazardly. In fact, even killing an evil monster may come into question if the monster says, well, I surrender. You would say, as a lawful good character, you'd probably say, okay, I take your surrender. But if the monster gets freed and does it again, then you may hold it, against them.
Well, sure. I mean, without getting too deep into any kind of abstract philosophy right here about good and evil, because you could go on about that for years. Typically what runs up, in the game is, people get their alignments. You get good, you get neutral, you get evil. But most people, and in every game I've ever been in with, a lot of them have been Delaney's DM games, we have a spread from lawful good to chaotic neutral, and that's as far as it goes.
Yeah.
You don't have anybody going any lower than chaotic neutral.
Yeah. You have your lawful good, your chaotic good, your neutral good.
Yeah.
You have your lawful neutral, chaotic neutral, true neutral, but we never have had anybody come in who is lawful evil, neutral evil, or chaotic evil. We just try and prevent those in our game because it can be a real disruption to the game and to the other players.
Well, sure. I mean, you have an evil character, all right, an evil game. All right, well, you can have all kinds of levels of evil. There's lawful evil, which would be like Darth Vader. And everybody always gives Darth Vader as an example of lawful evil. Okay, Darth Vader was evil, but believed in order within the Empire.
Right.
Okay, and the Empire itself, evil, basically, but it had order. The power was on, the water kept flowing, the space lanes kept being traveled. So you can argue that because even though they were evil, they still maintained order, so they weren't chaotic evil by any means, yet the Empire oppressed people. Okay? So you get into stuff like that. Now, as characters within a role-playing game, and specifically like D&D or Pathfinder, how do you play a character that is and we always talk about this. How do you play a character that's chaotic neutral, like a rogue? Like I prefer to call them thieves. But how do you play like a thief? A thief steals, but what if a thief steals from other party members?
Yeah.
Okay, then what? I mean, that's an issue. You know.
Yeah. Then you start getting into the conflict, player conflict.
Yeah.
And is that a good thing? Are you causing a problem within the game that's going to disrupt the game?
Right.
It's going to cause an issue between players, which
Yeah.
is not a good thing.
It's not a good thing. Because you all of a sudden you have a disharmonious, playing group, and someone's going to get mad and leave. And we don't like to have people get mad and leave. So our central question: should DMs change players' alignments? Well, what happens if a player acts out, and all of a sudden they do something evil? Is it up to the DM or up to the other players in the group or someone to call that character,
Right.
call that player on that character's problem?
Right. Now, one example that somebody gave on it would be as a DM saying, well, your alignment's changed. Basically, they're saying, check what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because you're not playing correctly within what you've dictated your character to be.
Yeah. A lawful paladin. A lawful paladin has to follow the law. Think of them as like a sheriff of a town who is elected to do good, to follow the rule of law. Okay, now we all know, and without getting in too deeply into philosophy here again, we all know that the rule of law sometimes does not jibe quite correctly with what we consider to be justice.
Right.
Okay. After all, slavery used to be lawful in this country. Okay, a long time ago. There's been a lot of stuff that doesn't jive quite with what we consider as justice. Justice being that the good get rewarded, the evil get punished. Okay, but say a paladin, who's good, a good paladin would have to uphold the law.
Right.
And to go back to what you were talking about before, if an evil monster surrendered, and the paladin would accept that evil monster's surrender and not kill it.
Right, but if the monster immediately got his chance to stab the paladin in the back, well, the paladin's going to have to,
The paladin will have to defend themselves. Right. But here's another question. What happened if the evil monster got free and killed somebody else but then surrendered again?
Yeah.
See, so that paladin would have to say, well, this time you're facing justice, and I'm going to lock you in stouter chains. Yeah. That kind of stuff. They just can't cross that line into barbarity, into murder. Okay?
Right. Now, we had a game with one DM that we had, and I was actually playing a paladin, and the rules within society is, even though I could detect evil on somebody, and I knew that they were screaming evil, I couldn't just outright do anything. I had to wait for them to act against myself or society before I could do anything, and I had to have proof to do it.
Well, if you try to act beforehand, you end up with the Philip K. Dick Minority Report problem, where how do you stop a crime before it's happening if you know that person's going to commit a crime?
Yeah.
That's another thing. And I don't think we've ever actually had that come up in any of our games, but we had a lot of evil characters get punished and get killed in our games, and you always got to
not characters.
Not characters, I'm sorry, monsters. But I've always kind of wondered, NPCs or whatever. I've always kind of wondered, just like, should we as good players give them more of a chance?
Yeah.
To either surrender, explain themselves, negotiate, whatever. Because, as soon as you start yanking out the swords and charging people, that's pretty much killing right there.
And I think a DM should say, wait a minute, you've just crossed the line. Your alignment is what? Okay, let me explain alignment here to you and what you just did. Now, if that doesn't fit within your character, then let's talk about negotiating to get your character more in line to what you want to play that's not evil.
So could you dictate then to player, you as a DM, could you dictate to a player and say, look, what you just did was an evil act. I'm gonna move your alignment now. Your alignment is no longer good. You are now chaotic.
I think as a DM, I think it's something that you need to discuss with the player. Say,
okay,
look, you either need to refocus your alignment and play what you've picked, or let's work the alignment proper to what you want to do,
Okay.
and come down to a sit down with the player or the players and come to an agreement.
Okay.
Because if it continues, it's going to be a disruption to the group and to the other players.
Yeah, and it's in a really good example, and we talk about this example a lot. Okay, is we had was he a monk?
Yeah, he was a monk.
We had a monk who was supposedly good.
Lawful. Well, no, he was lawful neutral.
He was lawful neutral. Okay, well, he's lawful. Okay. We had a monk, a player, and his character was this lawful neutral monk, and we were engaged in this kind of adventure where we had encountered, various types of other tribes, and the tribes were different than our tribe. And his idea was that he wanted to enslave some members of the other tribe.
Yeah, and even make the party appear to be his slaves to try and come across as a more powerful person to try and get his way.
So, and it wasn't an act. He actually really wanted to enslave this other tribe. And we all blanched at that. It says, isn't slavery bad? And his argument, of course, was, well, we don't know. I mean, we're in this D&D scenario, a fantasy scenario.
Maybe we're helping those people out.
Yeah. What if there are tribal enemies? Do we enslave our tribal enemies? And it got to be a really kind of a picky discussion. It's like, okay, well, by modern standards, of course, slavery is bad. Yet many cultures have enslaved other cultures. And the problem is when you start talking about D&D and fantasy, the whole fantasy role-playing aspect of it, well, then it can get kind of sticky again because, there's a lot of people who role-play slave and master and stuff like that. So, within our scenario, was that going to work out? And I think a lot of us really blanched at letting him do it. And we didn't let him do it because we felt that slavery was so repugnant. It was just one of those topics that we just couldn't bring up. And
then even pretending to enslave, that part of the party members were slaves was really not a lawful act.
It was not a lawful act. And I think our own personal repugnance against slavery, and within our playing group, we just wouldn't let that happen. I think he was pretty upset about that.
Yeah.
Monks themselves, we're talking about, kung fu monks, really. That's the kind of character that person is. Monks themselves have always been one of those classes that, for one thing, Delaney doesn't like to put in. And I don't like monks. I don't like monks. And the reason I don't like them is because, they do a fury of blows. They do all these flying fists. They fly through the sky. I had enough of that watching cheesy kung fu movies when I was a kid. And I really don't care that much to have that kind of stuff anymore.
But that's a whole nother episode.
That's a whole other episode, which we can talk about. But on the other hand, if the DM encounters a player character and they want to commit an evil act, or they do commit an evil act, in my opinion, it is perfectly feasible, and it's definitely the decent thing to do for that DM to actually dictate to that player that your alignment's changed.
Yeah, in the old days, the first and second edition, that was a common thing. If somebody did something that was bad, you had to follow your alignment to a T. And a paladin wasn't just going to attack something that okay, we assume it's evil, so it's got to be evil. That's not a lawful act because the abilities that the paladin had, detect evil, and protection from evil, were gifts to them that they weren't using.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things where they have the ability to suss out evil in amongst NPCs or characters. They use those abilities. Well, that says, of course, that there's evil within the world, and the paladin, has to fight evil. The paladin has to do it to cleanse the world from evil. Well, that's their character. That's what they do.
Yeah. Now, we did have a campaign that I ran in one of my worlds called More Wicca, which we actually didn't play so heavily upon alignment. Alignment was just kind of a base there. Everyone was just kind of a base. And how they acted within the game would kind of dictate. And then we played upon rules of fame and prestige. So if you did something really good, you got prestige. If you did something really bad, you would lose your fame and prestige.
Yeah.
And you wanted that because you could gain things by having a higher fame and prestige. You could dictate more money when you took a contract, or if you did something really well, the people would recognize you, and you might get, lower costs of things. But I think it was, in its own realm, it was a good thing to play with the prestige and fame instead of alignment. And then just kind of, the alignment scale would kind of go up and down based upon what somebody did.
Yeah, I remember that game, and there were things in the game that came up that were of kind of moral questionability. Breaking into people's homes,
Lying,
stealing, different things like that. And some of our characters were sort of lower on the fame scale, and some were a little higher, depending on what they did. I mean, my character in there was a chaotic character. It was a gnome mesmerist who essentially disguised himself as a child throughout most of the game. So he was lying about his appearance, but he would also control people's minds. Now,
but there was something dictating within that gnomes were really looked down upon, and
yeah,
then the mesmerist abilities he had
yeah.
would be looked upon as arcane. And then if you were doing things that were deceiving people, then you could get inquisitors chasing after you, and that was a bad thing.
That was a bad thing, and in order to survive, my gnome had to disguise himself as a child, a human child. Okay, that was in order to survive because gnomes were looked down upon, thought of as being really dishonest thieves and everything like that. And he was a magic user too. I mean, he was a mesmerist, and so he could control people's minds. The idea is in this world is you didn't want to do that because anybody who used magic, like witches or anybody like that, wizards, they were seen as the enemy because they had caused such vile destruction during the various wars preceding this campaign that any kind of magic users like that were looked down as the enemy, and they were killed, persecuted, burned at the stake. That's why the inquisitors would go around, and gather these people up and burn them at the stake or kill them or punish them or torture them. So you had to defend yourself. You had to lie, occasionally steal, and do things like that in order to preserve your life and the lives of your group. So in Morwicka, a lot of things were a little questionable there.
Yeah.
But for Delaney's credit, within the DM situation, she allowed us a little bit of wiggle room to play our alignments because this world was such a hostile world to people. Our group were a bunch of ex-soldiers who were basically pretty downtrodden. I mean, they were defeated soldiers who had been at one time forced soldiers, like forced laborers, like a convict gang of soldiers who had been freed after the war, but they were still looked down upon. So, the thing is
and they were forced into the winning side, but they had been people of the losing side.
Yeah, they were essentially forced conscripted soldiers. And so, the thing is like after the war, everybody looked down upon them. Their former comrades looked down upon them. The people where they had come from, their home villages looked down upon them. Everybody did.
The army they served under looked down upon them.
Yeah. And so Delaney allowed us a little bit of wiggle room there to play not so much our alignments, but to play our fame a little bit so that we could function within that kind of society. Yeah. And I guess in a way, with the singular question of this episode really, is, should a DM, change a player's alignment because of their acts? I think it's going to really come down to the DM, really.
I'd like to hear what you guys have to say or think on this subject. And like I said, I saw this on CBR.com, and then it was also on Reddit where they got the question from. So I'd really like to hear what all you think or believe. Should a DM change a character's alignment, or can a DM change a character's alignment?
Yeah.
So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and that way you get updates on when we're releasing videos. We do release a new video every twice a week on Wednesdays and Fridays at 10 o'clock Mountain Time.
And look out for our Campaign Tales episodes, which is actually a recap of our current ongoing Pathfinder game.
So with that, we're going to end this episode of Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
May all your adventures be epic.
And keep on rolling. Thanks, folks.